The building had been standing longer than anyone could remember. It was one of those narrow brick apartment blocks squeezed between newer towers, its windows dull and uneven, like eyes that refused to look straight ahead. The residents rarely spoke about it. They just lived there, quietly, carefully. Evan noticed the silence the first night he moved in. It was not the absence of sound. It was the way sound seemed to stop short, as if the walls were listening. His unit was on the 4th floor. The hallway outside his door smelled faintly of old paint and something metallic, something that didn't belong to any specific memory. The elevator did not reach the 4th floor. No one could explain why. "You'll get used to the stairs," the landlord had said, not meeting his eyes. Evan didn't mind. He told himself he preferred the exercise. That first night, as he unpacked, he noticed the building settling. Pipes clicked, wood creaked, the normal noises of an old structure. But there was something else, a soft dragging sound, slow, uneven, as if something heavy was being pulled across a floor far above him. He stopped moving and listened. The sound paused. Evan stood still, holding a box of books against his chest. He waited for footsteps, for voices, for laughter, anything human. Nothing followed. The dragging resumed, this time shorter, sharper, then silence again. He convinced himself it was a neighbor rearranging furniture. Old buildings carried sounds strangely. Everyone knew that. He finished unpacking and went to bed. Sleep came late. The air felt thick, stale, despite the open window. Sometime after midnight, Evan woke to the sound of breathing. It was not his own. It came from the hallway beyond his bedroom door. Slow, shallow, wet. He lay still, heart pounding, counting the seconds between breaths. 5, 6, 7. Then the sound stopped. Evan waited for the click of a door, the shuffle of footsteps moving away. None came. When morning arrived, the hallway was empty. No signs of anyone else. No damp footprints, no open doors. At work, he asked casually if anyone else in the building was a night owl. His coworker frowned. "You moved into the old place on Grant Street, right?" Evan nodded. "People don't really stay long there," she said. "Management turnover, tenants too." "Why?" Evan asked. She shrugged. Maintenance issues, complaints, nothing specific. But she didn't smile. That evening, Evan took the stairs slowly, 4 flights, 37 steps each. On the 3rd floor, he noticed a dark stain along the wall near the corner. It looked like old water damage, but it had dried into irregular streaks, almost like fingers dragged downward. Someone had tried to scrub it away. They hadn't succeeded. He reached his door and unlocked it, suddenly aware of how quiet the building felt. No television sounds, no music, no muffled conversations through thin walls, just that heavy, waiting stillness. Inside his apartment, everything looked untouched, exactly as he had left it. Except for one thing, the bathroom door was open. Evan was certain he had closed it before leaving for work. He stood in the entryway, keys still in his hand, listening. Nothing. He stepped inside. The bathroom light was off. The room was dark, the mirror catching only a faint reflection of the hallway behind him. As he reached for the switch, he noticed the smell, metallic, sharp, like old coins left too long in damp pockets. He turned on the light. The sink was empty. The tub dry, but the mirror was fogged, as if someone had recently breathed against it. Evan stared at the glass. The fog slowly thinned. As it did, faint lines appeared beneath it. Not words, just marks. Long, curved streaks, as if nails had dragged across the surface from the inside. Evan stepped back, pulse racing. The marks vanished as the last of the condensation faded. That night, he locked his bedroom door. It didn't help. The dragging sound returned after midnight, closer this time, not above him, outside his apartment. It moved along the hallway, stopped, moved again. Each scrape seemed to take effort, as though whatever caused it struggled with every inch. Evan pressed his ear against the door. The sound was directly outside. Then came a different noise, a soft knock, once, twice. Evan held his breath. The knob turned slightly, stopped. The knocking resumed, slower now. Evan backed away until his shoulders touched the far wall. The knocking stopped. After a long moment, something brushed against the door. A faint dragging slide, like skin against wood. Then it moved on. By morning, Evan had convinced himself it was sleep paralysis, stress, new surroundings. He didn't mention it to anyone. Days passed, then weeks. The building revealed small things. Doors left ajar in the stairwell, lights flickering only when he walked beneath them. Footsteps that stopped when he turned around. On the fifth floor, which officially did not exist, he once heard a radio playing softly, old music, distorted. It cut out the moment he climbed another step. One evening, he ran into Mrs. Calder, an elderly woman from the second floor. She paused when she saw him. "You're on the fourth," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Her mouth tightened. "You should keep your door locked at night." "I do." She hesitated, then leaned closer. "If you hear knocking," she whispered, "don't answer, even if it sounds like someone you know." "Why?" Evan asked. Mrs. Calder straightened. "Because some doors were never meant to be opened again." She left before he could ask more. That night, Evan dreamed of hallways that stretched too far, doors without numbers, and something dragging itself toward him, always just out of sight. He woke to find his front door unlocked. The chain hung loose, swaying slightly, as if disturbed moments before. On the floor outside, faint marks led away down the hallway, long, uneven, like something had been pulled back from his door. Evan closed it slowly, hands shaking. He finally decided to search the building's history. Records were sparse: fires, renovations, ownership changes. One incident stood out: a murder, decades ago. A tenant found dead in the hallway of the fourth floor. The report was vague, cause of death unspecified. What caught Evan's attention was the final line: the body appeared to have been moved. No one was ever charged. The building had been renovated shortly after, walls repainted, floors replaced, but the fourth floor remained unchanged. Evan closed his laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the building breathe around him. Somewhere above, something began to drag itself across the floor again, slower than before, closer. Evan didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bed with the lamp on, listening to the building settle around him. Every sound felt deliberate now, as if the walls were testing his attention. When morning came, he called in sick. The apartment felt different in daylight, less threatening, almost ordinary, almost. He spent the morning inspecting his door. The lock was intact, the chain hadn't broken, there was no sign of forced entry. Still, it had been open. Around noon, Evan went down to the management office. It occupied a narrow space beside the laundry room, its window covered by yellowing blinds. The woman behind the desk introduced herself as Carol. She smiled too quickly. "I wanted to ask about the fourth floor," Evan said. Her smile thinned. "What about it?" "The elevator doesn't go there. Some residents warned me about knocking at night." Carol leaned back in her chair. "Old buildings have quirks." "Someone was murdered there," Evan said. The room went quiet. Carol's eyes flicked to the door behind him, then back to his face. "That was a long time ago." "Why wasn't the floor renovated?" he asked. "It was," she said. "Mostly." "Mostly?" She stood. "If you're uncomfortable, you're free to terminate your lease early." That was the end of the conversation. Back upstairs, Evan noticed the hallway smelled stronger than usual. That metallic scent lingered near the stairwell. He followed it upward. The stairwell light flickered as he climbed past the fourth floor landing. Above it, the staircase narrowed slightly, the walls closing in. There was no number marking the fifth floor, just a blank space where a sign might have been removed. Evan hesitated. The air grew colder with each step. The smell intensified. At the top, he found a door he had never seen before, painted the same dull beige as the rest of the building, but older, cracked. There was no handle, just a dark smear where one should have been. Evan reached out, then stopped. A sound came from the other side, breathing, slow, labored. He backed away, heart hammering. The breathing continued until he reached the fourth floor landing. Then it stopped. That night, the knocking returned, 3 times. Evan didn't move. The knocking became scratching. Long nails dragged across wood, testing the surface. Searching. A whisper followed, not words, just the sound of air pushed through a damaged throat. Evan pressed his hands over his ears until it passed. In the days that followed, residents began disappearing, not vanishing, leaving. Mrs. Calder's apartment stood empty by the end of the week, her door sealed with fresh paint. The radio on the 5th floor played every night now, always the same song, a warped melody that faded whenever Evan tried to get closer. He began seeing things out of the corner of his eye, a shape reflected in dark windows, a shadow stretched too long along the hallway wall. Once, in the stairwell mirror, he saw someone standing behind him, a man with sunken eyes and a mouth pulled into a permanent grimace, his legs twisted at an impossible angle as though they had never healed correctly. Evan spun around. The stairwell was empty. The mirror cracked from corner to corner. He reported it to management. Carol sighed and added it to a clipboard. That night, Evan dreamed of dragging himself across concrete, of hands gripping at anything solid, of pain that never ended. He woke with his palms bleeding, nails torn. On his bathroom mirror, words had been scratched deeply into the glass. "Let me finish." Evan didn't touch them. He packed a bag instead. As he stepped into the hallway, he froze. The dragging sound came from behind him, not down the hall, inside his apartment. Something shifted slowly across the floor, heavy, determined. Evan ran. He didn't stop until he reached the street. From the sidewalk, he looked up at the building. One window on the 4th floor glowed faintly. Not his. Someone was inside. Evan spent the night in his car. By morning, exhaustion drove him back. The hallway was clean, too clean. The scratches on his mirror were gone. The words erased. Everything looked reset. At his door, a folded piece of paper waited on the floor. No handwriting, just a photocopy of an old newspaper clipping. Local tenant found dead in apartment hallway. The article was brief. The victim's name was Thomas Hale. Witnesses reported hearing prolonged sounds of movement in the hallway prior to discovery. Cause of death remained undetermined. Evan turned the page. A second clipping had been attached. Former tenant suspected in disappearance. No name, no photo, just a note scrawled in faded ink. He tried to leave. That evening, Evan confronted Carol. "I know what happened," he said. She didn't deny it. "You should have left," she replied. "He's still here," Carol nodded. "He doesn't like unfinished things." "What does he want?" She closed her eyes. To be moved, to be seen, to be finished. Evan understood then. The body hadn't been moved out of the building. It had been moved up. That night, Evan heard the dragging begin earlier than usual. It came from the stairs, step by step, closer. The knocking never came. Instead, his door slowly creaked open. Evan stood frozen as the smell filled the room. A shape entered the light, broken, twisted, still dragging itself forward with stubborn intent. Its eyes locked onto Evan, not angry, expectant, as if Evan had something it needed. The radio upstairs cut out. The building went silent. The thing reached the center of the room and stopped. It raised a hand, pointed toward the stairs, then toward Evan. The message was clear. It wasn't finished, and neither was Evan. Evan did not scream. He stood in the center of his apartment, staring at the thing that had dragged itself out of the darkness, and felt a strange clarity settle over him. Fear was still there, tight and cold in his chest, but beneath it was something else. Recognition. The figure did not move closer. It simply waited. Up close, Evan could see how wrong it was. One leg bent inward at an angle that should have snapped bone. The other dragged uselessly behind, leaving faint marks on the floor that faded almost as soon as they appeared. Its clothes hung in strips, frozen in a state of decay that didn't progress. Its face looked as if it had been set that way. Jaw clenched, lips pulled thin, eyes hollow, but focused. It was not trying to scare him. It was asking. Evan swallowed. "What do you want?" The figure's mouth opened slightly. No sound came out. Instead, the smell intensified. Metal and dust, and something old that had never been allowed to rest. The thing lifted its hand again, pointing toward the ceiling. Then the stairs. Then back at Evan. A sequence. "You want me to go up there?" Evan said quietly. The figure nodded once. The movement looked painful. Evan stepped back until his calves hit the couch. His heart raced, but the figure did not advance. It only watched him, eyes unblinking. "You were killed here," Evan said. "They moved you." The figure's fingers curled. A low sound escaped its throat. Not a word, more like air being forced through something broken. Evan glanced at the door. He could still run. The thought felt distant, unreal. The figure tilted its head, as if reading the hesitation on Evan's face. Slowly, it turned away from him. It began to drag itself toward the door. Not urgently, not threatening, patient. Evan followed. The hallway lights flickered as they stepped out into the corridor. The figure moved with familiarity, as if it knew every uneven tile, every slight slope in the floor. At the stairwell, it paused. The smell grew stronger. Evan's foot hovered over the first step. His instincts screamed at him to stop, to turn back, to leave the building and never look behind him. But the figure was already ascending, dragging, stopping, dragging again. Each step took effort. Evan followed. The 4th floor landing passed without incident. The walls here seemed closer, the ceiling lower. The sound of their movement felt muffled, absorbed by the structure itself. As they climbed higher, the air cooled. The stairwell light above flickered, then went dark. Evan froze. Ahead of him, the figure continued upward, illuminated only by a dim glow that seemed to come from nowhere. The fifth floor emerged slowly. It was not unfinished. It was sealed. The hallway was narrower than the others, the walls stained darker, the floor uneven. Doors lined both sides, all closed, all unmarked. The radio played softly at the far end. The figure stopped at the first door on the left. It raised its hand. The door creaked open on its own. Inside was a small apartment, bare, empty, except for the stains. They marked the floor and walls in irregular patterns, darker than the surrounding surface. Someone had tried to paint over them once. The paint had peeled back, revealing the marks beneath. Evan stepped inside and felt his stomach tighten. The air here felt heavy, pressurized. The figure dragged itself to the center of the room and stopped. It looked down. Evan followed its gaze. The floorboards were uneven there, slightly raised. "They hid you," Evan said. The figure nodded again. Evan knelt and pressed his hand against the wood. It was colder than the rest of the floor. When he pushed, it shifted slightly. A hollow sound answered him. Footsteps echoed in the hallway behind them. Evan turned. Carol stood in the doorway, her expression tight. "I told you to leave," she said. "You knew," Evan replied. "You all knew." Carol stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The radio cut off. "We did what we had to," she said. "The building couldn't afford the scandal, the lawsuits. You let him rot up here." "He was already dead," she snapped. It didn't matter where the body was. The figure let out a sound then, a low, trembling noise that filled the room. Carol backed away. "No," she whispered. "It's not supposed to be active." The figure dragged itself toward her. Not fast, not violent, but unstoppable. Carol screamed as the lights shattered overhead. Evan shut his eyes. When the sound stopped, the room was dark. The figure stood still again. Carol was gone. In her place, faint marks led toward the far wall, then vanished. Evan opened his eyes slowly. "You didn't kill her," he said. The figure shook its head. It pointed to the floor again, to the hidden space beneath the boards. Evan understood. This was not revenge. It was correction. Over the next hours, Evan worked. He pried up boards. He uncovered what had been hidden. He found what remained. He did not look closely. When dawn came, the figure was weaker, its movements slower. As the first siren sounded below, the figure sank to the floor. Its eyes met Evan's one last time. Gratitude flickered there. Then nothing. The body faded, leaving only silence. The fifth floor felt empty in a way it never had before. Evan descended the stairs alone. By afternoon, police had sealed the building. Reporters gathered. Questions were asked. Evan answered none of them. He moved out that night. Weeks later, he read about the arrests, the investigations, the long history uncovered. The building was condemned. But sometimes, when Evan walks past old apartments late at night, he hears something familiar. A soft, dragging sound, moving upward, still searching for something left unfinished. Evan thought it was over. For a while, it felt that way. The nightmares stopped first. Then the smell faded from his clothes. Then the sound. Weeks passed without the dragging, without the radio melody bleeding through walls that shouldn't exist. He found a new apartment across town. New paint, new wiring, a working elevator that reached every floor it claimed to serve. At night, Evan slept with the lights off again. That should have been the end of it. But endings were never clean. It started with reflections. In the glass of the subway window, Evan sometimes saw movement behind him when the car was empty. A shift of weight, a bend at the knee that didn't look right. When he turned, there was nothing. At work, he caught himself listening for sounds that weren't there. The scrape of fabric on concrete, the slow rhythm of effortful movement. His coworkers said he looked better, rested. Evan smiled and agreed. One evening, as he was leaving the office, the security guard stopped him. "Hey," the man said. "You live near Grant Street, right?" Evan hesitated. "I used to." The guard nodded. "They're reopening part of it." Evan felt his chest tighten. That building was condemned. "Part of it," the guard repeated. "They sealed off the top floors. New management, new name." "What about the fifth floor?" Evan asked. The guard frowned. "There is no fifth floor." That night, Evan dreamed of stairs again. Not the same ones. These were narrower, steeper. The walls were unfinished concrete, damp to the touch. The air smelled familiar, metal, dust. He woke with his heart racing. The next day, Evan took a detour on his way home. Grant Street looked different. Fresh signage, bright banners advertising modern units. The old brick facade had been scrubbed clean, too clean. Evan stood across the street, watching people enter and leave, laughing, carrying groceries, unaware. A radio played faintly somewhere inside. Evan crossed the street. The lobby had been renovated, new flooring, new lighting. The desk where Carol once sat was gone, replaced by a touchscreen directory. There was no mention of upper floors. Evan didn't take the elevator, he took the stairs. The stairwell looked the same. Same slope, same dimness, same place where the light flickered halfway up. On the fourth floor, Evan paused. The hallway had been repainted, but the smell lingered faintly beneath the fresh layers. The doors had new numbers now. His old apartment door was sealed shut. No handle, no hinges, just a smooth surface where a doorway had once been. Evan's pulse quickened. He continued upward. The stairs narrowed again. The walls pressed closer. The fifth floor waited exactly where it had before. Unmarked, unchanged. The radio played louder here. The same song. The first door on the left was open. Inside, the room was empty. No stains, no raised floorboards. Evan stepped inside and felt the pressure return, that heaviness in the air. "You finished it," he said softly. The radio cut out. The temperature dropped. Something shifted behind him. Evan didn't turn right away. He already knew. The figure stood in the doorway, fainter than before, less defined. Its movements were slower, weaker. "You're still here," Evan said. The figure tilted its head. Its eyes no longer held expectation. They held confusion. Evan understood. The body had been found, the truth exposed. But the building was still standing. People were still living here. The unfinished thing wasn't the death. It was the forgetting. The figure raised its hand and pointed downward, not toward the hidden space, toward the floors below. Evan felt cold spread through his chest. "You want them to know," he said. The figure nodded. "But they sealed this place off," Evan said. "They're pretending it never existed." The figure took a step forward. Its foot passed through the floor slightly, distorting the surface like water. It was losing cohesion. Time was running out. Evan closed his eyes. He saw headlines, heard sirens, felt the weight of hands gripping his shoulders as he was pulled away from that place. None of it had stopped the building from reopening. "Let me think," Evan whispered. The figure waited. That night, Evan didn't go home. He sat in his car across from the building and watched. At midnight, the lights on the fifth floor flickered on. People below didn't notice. They never did. Evan began documenting everything: photos, recordings, sound. He left notes on doors, slipped copies of old reports into mailboxes, sent anonymous messages to local journalists. Most were ignored. A few weren't. Residents began complaining about sounds, about smells, about doors that opened on their own. A woman on the third floor reported waking up with scratches on her mirror. Management dismissed it. Then someone fell, not pushed, not attacked. They said the stairs shifted under his feet, that something pulled. The incident made the news. Evan returned to the fifth floor that night. The figure was weaker still, its outline barely held together. "You don't have much time," Evan said. The figure shook its head. It pointed at Evan, then at the building, then at the stairs. Evan felt the truth settle in his chest. It wasn't asking to be remembered. It was asking to be replaced. "You want me to stay," Evan said. The figure nodded. "Not forever," Evan said. "Just long enough." The figure's hand trembled. It nodded again. Evan sat on the floor of the empty apartment and waited. When the dragging sound returned, it came from below, from the fourth floor. Evan stood. The stairs creaked under his weight as he descended. Halfway down, the air grew thick again. The smell returned. A shape emerged from the darkness below. Not the same figure. Newer, less defined. Another unfinished thing. Evan understood then. The building didn't hold one ghost. It held a system. A place where people were moved, hidden, forgotten. Someone had to remain aware. Someone had to guide the unfinished upward. Evan stepped aside and let the shape pass. It dragged itself past him, moving toward the fifth floor. Evan followed. Behind them, the stairwell light flickered. Below, footsteps echoed as residents moved through the building, unaware of what passed just above their heads. At the top, the shape dissolved into the air. The radio fell silent. The figure in the doorway looked at Evan one last time. This time, its expression was calm. It stepped backward and vanished. Evan remained. The fifth floor felt heavier now, more aware. Evan took a slow breath. He closed the door behind him. Some buildings needed caretakers, not to protect the living, but to remember the dead. The fifth floor did not feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. Evan learned its rhythms slowly, not through sound, but through pressure. A sense of weight that shifted from room to room, from wall to wall. At first, nothing happened. Days passed, then weeks. The building below continued as if nothing had changed. New tenants moved in. Furniture scraped across floors. Laughter echoed up stairwells that were never meant to carry it. Evan stayed above it all. He slept on the floor of the first apartment, the one with no number. He ate when hunger forced him to, bringing food up from outside late at night. No one ever saw him. The fifth floor did not want witnesses. The dragging returned gradually, not every night, not always the same. Sometimes it came from the fourth floor, sometimes lower. Sometimes it didn't come at all, leaving Evan in an uneasy stillness that felt worse than noise. The first time Evan intervened, he almost failed. He heard the sound just after midnight. A new rhythm, faster, panicked. He followed it down the stairs. On the third floor, the air thickened suddenly. The metallic smell hit him like a wall. A woman stood near the stairwell, frozen in place. She was alive. Her eyes were wide, fixed on something Evan could not see yet. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. Behind her, the shadow pooled. It clung to the wall like a stain, half-formed, stretching forward in jerks rather than steps. Evan moved without thinking. "Don't run," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. The woman turned toward him. "You see it too," she whispered. "Yes." The shadow paused. It reacted to Evan's voice, drawing back slightly, as if confused. "Go," Evan said softly. "Down, now." The woman didn't hesitate. She bolted down the stairs, her footsteps fading quickly. The shadow surged forward. Evan stepped into its path. The pressure was immediate, crushing, cold. Images flooded his mind, hands pushing, a fall that never ended, a body dragged somewhere it didn't belong. Evan forced himself to breathe. "I know," he said. "You don't get to take her." The shadow hesitated. It did not retreat. Instead, it circled him, testing, probing for weakness. Evan felt something pull at his chest, like fingers digging inward. "No," he said. "Up." He turned and began climbing. The shadow followed. Each step upward weakened it. Its shape blurred, movements growing erratic. At the fifth floor, it collapsed inward, dissolving into the air with a sound like breath released after holding too long. Evan collapsed against the wall, shaking. The radio played once, one note, then silence. After that, the building changed its behavior. The manifestations became clearer, less chaotic, almost cooperative. Evan learned the signs. A cold draft where there shouldn't be one. A flicker in a light that stayed broken no matter how often it was replaced. A door that refused to stay closed. Each sign meant something unfinished was rising. Evan guided them, never touching, never forcing, just directing, redirecting, up, always up. He did not count how many there were, he only noticed the cost. His reflection began to change. Not visibly, not all at once, but mirrors stopped responding correctly. His movements lagged slightly, as if the glass needed time to catch up. Sometimes he did not see himself at all. He stopped going outside. The smell followed him now, faint but constant. Below, tenants reported improvements. Fewer noises, better sleep. Management praised the renovations. They never mentioned the fifth floor. One night, Evan found a note on the stairwell landing between the fourth and fifth floors, written in careful handwriting. "We see you." He stared at it for a long time. Another note appeared days later. "It's quieter now." The third came a week after that. "You don't belong there." Evan tore that one down. The next manifestation was different. It came from the lobby, a violent disruption, sudden, loud. Evan reached the stairs just as a man was shoved backward, tumbling down the steps. He hit the landing hard, didn't move. The shadow loomed above him, thicker than any Evan had seen before. This one was not confused, it was deliberate. Evan felt the pull immediately, stronger than before. "This one isn't yours," Evan said, planting his feet. The shadow surged. Evan was dragged down a step, then another. Pain flared through his leg. The man on the landing groaned, alive, barely. Evan dug his fingers into the railing. "Up," he said through clenched teeth. The shadow recoiled violently. For a moment, Evan saw it clearly. Not a single shape. but many layered together. Unfinished things stacked atop one another. The building had been feeding. Evan screamed as the pressure tore at him. The shadow broke apart, fragments ripping upward, dissolving as they reached the 5th floor. Evan collapsed. When he woke, he was alone. The man was gone. Sirens wailed outside. Evan knew then what the notes meant. Someone had noticed the pattern. Someone was watching the building the way Evan did, and they weren't afraid of what lived above. They were afraid of what Evan was becoming. Evan stopped sleeping altogether. It wasn't insomnia, it was permission. The 5th floor no longer allowed it. When he closed his eyes, the building pressed closer, filling the space where dreams should have been. He learned to rest without losing awareness, body still while something else stayed alert. That something else was growing. The next time Evan went outside, he didn't realize how long it had been. The street looked unfamiliar. New signs, new storefronts. People passed him without a second glance, though a few slowed unconsciously, their eyes sliding away as if they couldn't quite focus on him. His reflection in a car window lagged again, then didn't appear at all. Evan returned to the building before sunset. The 5th floor greeted him with a heaviness that felt almost approving. The radio turned on by itself. Not the old song this time, static. Voices whispered beneath it, fragmented, overlapping. Evan understood without being told. Something was wrong below. Not a manifestation, a decision. He descended the stairs slowly, sensing tension building in the structure itself. The walls seemed to lean inward as he passed, as if trying to listen. On the 2nd floor, he heard raised voices. Management. 2 men stood in the hallway with clipboards and measuring tools. One gestured toward the stairwell. "We seal it off here. Concrete, permanent." The other nodded. "What about reports?" "They stop once there's no access." Evan stepped into view. Both men froze. "You can't do that," Evan said. The first man frowned. "Who are you?" Evan opened his mouth. No answer came. The building answered for him. The lights shattered overhead. The men screamed as the floor tilted beneath their feet. One fell hard, the sound of bone against concrete echoing down the hall. Evan stood unmoving. The shadow rose behind him, not attacking, observing. The second man scrambled backward, dragging his injured colleague. "Get it away from me," he cried. Evan felt the pull, stronger than ever, not from the shadow, from the building itself. It was no longer asking him to guide, it was asking him to replace. "No," Evan whispered. The shadow shifted. For the first time it spoke, not aloud, inside him. "You already have." Evan saw it then, the pattern. The building didn't create unfinished things, it collected them. People who were moved, silenced, forgotten, and caretakers were no different. Evan had crossed the threshold the night he stayed. He had not been guiding the dead upward. He had been teaching the building how to use him. The injured man moaned. The shadow surged. Evan stepped between it and the living. "This ends now," he said. He turned and walked back toward the stairs. Up. The pull intensified, tearing at him, trying to anchor him in place. Evan forced himself forward, each step heavier than the last. The 5th floor waited. The radio screamed as he crossed the threshold. Every door flew open at once. The rooms filled with pressure, with presence. Unfinished things gathered. Evan stood at the center and finally understood his role. Not caretaker, anchor. He took a slow breath. "I stayed so they wouldn't have to," he said. The building pressed down, walls cracked, the radio cut out. Evan felt himself thinning, spreading, dissolving into the structure around him. The memories bled out of him, the smells, the sounds, the awareness. Below, the stairwell collapsed. Concrete sealed the upper levels completely. Emergency crews arrived to find nothing but rubble above the 4th floor. No 5th floor, no bodies, no answers. The building reopened months later under a new name. Quiet, stable. Tenants reported better sleep. No sounds at night, no smells, no doors opening on their own. Years passed. Sometimes late at night, someone on the 4th floor would pause on the stairs. They would feel watched, not threatened, observed, guided. If they listened closely, they might hear a sound beneath the building's silence. Not dragging, breathing, steady, holding. Because some places don't need ghosts. They need someone who knows when to stay. And Evan never left.